The long-awaited WHO report on the origins of COVID-19 is out, and many are not happy. The 120-page report failed to supply any definitive answers. It says the virus was most likely transmitted to humans from a bat. So let's discuss this more with Professor Barry Schuber, virology expert from the Ministerial Advisory Committee on COVID-19. He joins us from Johannesburg. Very good morning to you, Professor. What do you make of the findings of the WHO report?
Yes, good morning, Jane. To be honest, I haven't really seen the report, just seen reports about the report.
Yeah.
It was really, I think part of the reason for having this investigation was the kind of, I guess one can call it conspiracy theories, but, theories that perhaps there was a laboratory leak or that either accidental or deliberate, and I think they really wanted to kind of quash that. And I think there's really no evidence that there was any either accidental leak from the laboratory or, to make it even more kind of far-fetched, a deliberate leak. I think it is one of what we call an infection coming from an animal source to humans. And when you have these epidemics in animals, we call them zoonoses. And we've had a number of examples of this, Ebola and Marburg and Lassa, a number of these, and in fact even HIV. Probably resided in an animal reservoir and then what we call crossed the species barrier to establish itself in the human population. The exact route in terms of coronavirus, I think, still really needs to be established. We know that bats are a major reservoir of a number of viruses which do cross the species barrier into humans. And this is just one example.
All right. I mean, nobody wants to hear that it came from a lab. I mean, they haven't written that out completely, that it hasn't stemmed from there. But just let's talk about how possibly complicated it would be for man to create such a virus. I mean, is it possible?
Well, man has created, for example, poliovirus, which is a very, very simple virus. The coronavirus is a much more complicated virus. So, yes, there is a theoretical possibility that a virus structure could be synthesized by human beings. Whether it would be an infectious replicating organism, that still hasn't yet been established. But certainly, theoretically, one can put together the structure of a virus, both the nucleic acid, in other words, the genetic component, as well as the outer protein shell. And that can then self-replicate itself. Whether it can cause disease, not yet. We don't know it yet.
And I was just saying that obviously we don't want it to be man-made because we don't want any sort of negative response when it comes to China and Chinese people. Tell us what we're looking at the moment, Professor, when it comes to mutations and how quickly they are spreading and changing.
Yeah, we divide our viruses into what we call DNA and RNA viruses. And the RNA viruses are those viruses which are liable to mutate, to change. What they do is that they substitute one of the building blocks called the nucleotides in the genetic code, and that then translates itself into a change in the protein. And that can alter the properties of the virus. And that's what we've seen with coronavirus. So it substitutes a protein which allows the virus to become more contagious, more infectious. In some cases, there's some evidence maybe even more virulent, that cause more severe disease. And thirdly, it may then also escape from the immune response of the host, either from a natural infection or potentially from a vaccine as well. So these viruses are liable to mutate. The kind of prime example, of course, is influenza. The flu virus mutates very readily, and that's why we have to update our vaccine annually. Coronavirus, not quite as mutable, not quite as changeable, but it also does change regularly, as we've seen. And that will have some bearing in our future strategy for vaccines.
Okay, some advice from you. I mean, firstly, I was just thinking out loud now, and this could be a silly question, forgive me. But so we're getting 30 more vaccines. Does that mean 30 million more? Does that mean only 15 million people will get it, or do 30 get it? And if you get that, should you also get your flu vaccine? Or if you've had COVID, should you also get your flu vaccine too?
Yeah, okay. Well, firstly, let me start with the flu vaccine. Yeah, certainly flu vaccine is definitely recommended, and particularly for people that are at risk, the elderly and those with underlying disease, they must get the flu vaccine. Because, first of all, you don't want to kind of compound coronavirus with flu, and also you don't want to kind of confuse the diagnosis. So you want to prevent flu, And then also, so I think particularly in the coming winter season, it's very important that people do get the flu vaccine. In terms of the number of doses, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a single dose. So 30 million doses will be for 30 million people.
Okay.
The Pfizer vaccine is 2 doses. So I think it's 20 million will come from Pfizer. That means for 10 million people.
Professor Barry Shoup, always good to talk to you. Thank you.